Hello, and welcome back to And All the Things. I'm very excited today to share our guest with you. His name is Ryan McKinney. He is a coach, he is a believer, he is a giver, he is indeed all the things. Ryan Kinney is committed to helping success-hungry professionals flourish at home and at work. He draws from a deep well of experience to illustrate key leadership and performance concepts, making it easy for audiences to absorb. He also believes experiential learning is best, but learning experiences can be borrowed from others. And this episode is going to walk us through a lot of his experiences, how he got to where he is, and how he helps other people go beyond where they are today. He's got 20 years of leadership experience in financial services, sales and leadership, lean manufacturing, and operations planning. He has done so much that he brings so much to the table today. He also brings a devout sense of faith, a devout sense of curiosity, and a desire to keep imagination alive. So please enjoy this conversation today between me and my new friend Ryan as we talk through what it means to live your own dream, how he helps first responders grow beyond the struggles that they so deeply face today. He talks about how he helps people move into their own understanding using 4 basic disciplines, and he's going to share them with you right now. So please enjoy the show, and as always, make it a great day. Hello, Ryan McKinney and all the things. Thank you so much for joining us here today. It is always my pleasure to invite people onto this show who are having different conversations than me, but using some of the same language. And I think that what our guests are going to hear today is 2 coaches who have really interesting and kind of parallel stories in a lot of ways, sharing a lot of gems of authenticity. So without further ado, I'm going to let you introduce us a little bit more than your professional bio might say.
Sure. I'll do the flyby on the professional bio just because I need to, right? Just so get the juices flowing a little bit. So my name is Ryan McKinney. I'm a life leadership and performance coach, and I help people to move to the next level. And I do that by helping them with their confidence, by overcoming their inner critic, disbanding some of those limiting beliefs they've got, but also about accomplishing some of their big external goals that they've got. And that might mean a new career. It might mean a new business. It might mean patching up a relationship in their family. So that's my spiel, and I'm going to stick to it.
I love a good spiel. I love a good spiel. And I really appreciate when we talk about human beings, we drive people toward their professional goals, towards their business aspirations. But I find we can't do that if they're not moving forward in their personal lives and in who they are, and really the conversations that they're having with the most important people in their life. Do you find that?
Yeah, it's almost like it's like this internal quicksand that they're kind of stepping in and trying to run. And the faster that they try to run, the more they try to do. In other words, the more they feel stuck and just kind of get stuck in that. And without going inside, like the heart and the head part of you, that internal part of you that connects, without doing some work there, the rest of it, you might have some short-term success, but a lot of times what I'll find is when people don't do that inner work, let me say it like that, when they don't do that inner work, they will pogo back and forth. It is, yo-yo back and forth, whether it's weight loss, whether it's career, whether it's happiness, whether it's relationships. They will do a lot of things, but if they haven't changed the who they are, those things always come back.
Yeah, I always think of it like you can run from yourself, but you won't get far. And as you're running, right, you're collecting the happiness and the suffering, and you're waving in the wind with both of them. And there's no sense of stability and control. And I say that from personal experience, because by all accounts, I made it to that place of being successful, having everything in the right place, right? Check boxes checked. But I was sad, right? I was so sad. And I was working with business coaches, and I was trying to push forward in that way. But without me stopping and saying, but Michaela, are you happy? Like, are you in this? Are you enjoying this?
And truly, I could have changed nothing about the conditions and only changed the way I looked within, and it would have been a different story, right?
Yeah.
How do you help people do that, right? Because I know I have my own experience getting to and through this, but how do you help people keep that big eye on the prize goal forward, but also slow down and look within? If that's an adequate way to summarize it.
Yeah. It's I run into that a lot. I've had quite a few people that come to me and they say, I really struggle with setting goals.
Mm-hmm.
And what they really mean is they struggle with setting goals that they'll stick to.
Yeah.
And I think part of that because they haven't really changed the identity of who they are, or actually really just acknowledged the identity of who they are.
Right. It might be multiple identities that they're trying to fill a role for, and they're not owning their true authentic one. Right.
Yeah, exactly. They've created, you know, there was this guy one time when I was in corporate and he, walked by. This was his greeting every time. I love him to death. He's a good friend to this day. But I said, "Hey, how are things going?" And he's like, living the dream. And he freaked out one day because I said, "Is it your dream?" And just kind of kept walking. And he came back to me a couple hours later. He's like, "Man, what you said kind of shook me a little bit. Like, I'm probably living somebody else's dream." And it's a big challenge people have, is they set these goals to accomplish what some other story that someone was living in. Maybe it was a parent, maybe it was a teacher, maybe it was an athletics coach when they were younger. Maybe it was a professor in college. Maybe it was a boss they had early in their career that kind of plants this seed that this is where you're going, but they never checked it. They never said, is that what I'm meant to do? So, kind of come back around to the question, how do I do that? One, sometimes it's kicking and screaming. Like sometimes the people are like, no, we need to work on the goal. Like it's the thing like I'm trying to do. And I'm like, yeah, we're going to do that. And it's almost like a Mr. Miyagi moment. It's like, no, we're going to go back and work on this first, and then you'll be ready to do the big tournament kind of thing.
It is a little Miyagi-ish, isn't it? Right. Trying to find the right balance between, I feel this is in my role. It's not my job to tell people what to do. That's the opposite of my job. My job, to your scenario where you said to that gentleman, but is it your dream? You could have said, dude, you're out of alignment, right? Like you need to go work in a zoo or whatever his passion is. But it's to ask the questions to get that inner motivation going, right?
Yeah.
So is that something that you learned only through the devotion to become a coach, or do you have your own story of feeling like you're living someone else's dream?
The answer is yes to both of those.
Yeah. Yes. And yes. I had a feeling.
Yeah. So for me, I was in leadership in corporate America for 20 years. And the first 15 of that, I had a lot of really good mentors and folks around me and learn. I mean, I'm an avid learner. I love to pick up new things from other leaders and people that kind of get you thinking about how you can, be better. So I had done that. And there was a lot of like hodgepodgey ways that I would support other people and be their mentor.
Right.
And then when I hit my brick walls, glass ceilings, and essentially, felt like I couldn't move any higher in the organization, I got a coach. And in a very short amount of time, they methodically facilitated a process of transformation by being that outside person and essentially looking in and asking the right questions, activating the right things within me so that I could change myself. And the fact that it was this, it wasn't a somebody telling you kind of engagement. It was more about a discovery of what it truly meant to be there. It didn't feel forced. It felt guided, like that. I mean, essentially that's what we do, right? We're the Obi-Wan Kenobis of personal transformation. So
I really like that. I might have to do some AI graphics and put our faces on an Obi-Wan for the graphic of this podcast.
But that was the moment for me where I was like, no, I want to learn that methodical approach to help people transform. Like no more is it about, the 10 things that got Ryan to where he is. It's
Right.
more about the 10 things that, people need to think about when they are wanting to transform and want to change. And how are you thinking about that and guiding them through that process? That for me was the yes and yes part of it. Yeah, I had my own challenge that allowed me to discover that's what I wanted to do. But then when I went headlong into it and got certified as a coach, I was like, oh, well, no wonder, right? This is how it works.
This is it.
Yeah.
This is it. And, so often we think that we have to be able to solve our own problems, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we've been given these big, beautiful brains and they should be able to discern and filter our experiences to lead us in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
But what gets in the way of that then, right? Because we do have these brains and these voices and these spirits inside, but yet there are so many people struggling to find their way, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you define the noise that interferes with that divine voice inside that says, this is my dream. I'm going to live this dream wholeheartedly, not someone else's dream.
Mm. I do. There's a lot of, you said something in there about the people always kind of want to do things on their own. And it made me, immediately this image of me, it's kind of silly, image of me tiling my bathroom in our first house. Like, okay. I'd watched enough.
Kind of a momentous feat.
Yeah. I had watched enough HGTV, a friend of mine had a tile saw, like only needed a couple of tools and it was going to be, thousands of dollars cheaper. So why not? Right. Mm-hmm. And I remember, like, I will never forget the look on my wife's face in like week 3 of the bathroom not being finished. And that was one of the moments where I learned that some things are not DIY. Like mm-hmm. some of them are, you're going to need somebody else that's mm-hmm. done this before. So that, made me think of that, right? It's like, it's
a great example.
Yeah.
It's a great example.
Because it's a struggle. And you ask anybody that's done a DIY project, they probably won't do the second one like that. Like, unless they have to, right? But we do that all the time with our personal development, professional development, our transformation, and to whom we're to become.
Right.
And the other part is that we've got this old version of us living inside of us that wants us, don't disrupt the apple cart. Like, don't flip things over. Things are going just fine the way they are. You're not dead, are you? Like, who do you think you are to do this? Like, that inner critic is so powerful. And that inner critic will tell you that DIY is the way to go. Like, you can ease into this. You can do this easy, right?
Well, especially when Instagram, everyone in the world is telling us, oh, DIY is so easy. You can do it. You can do anything. And, forget this, forget that. But the reality is it's a cost benefit analysis, right? Like, of course you can do the tiling. Of course you can. Is it worth it? Is it interesting to you? Is that something you want to pursue? Is that on your bucket list? Great. But then what are you willing to risk, right? Mm-hmm. Are you willing to risk 3 weeks or more and then potentially having to redo it? Because we have to explore that, right? I always ask people when I start working, what have you tried before? And mm-hmm. kind of to circle back to the conversation earlier, I have seen people have tried all the food changes, all the yoga changes, all the job changes, moving locations. They've tried this, whatever, all the things, right? Mm-hmm. And yet they haven't touched the inside thing. They haven't said, is this real for me? Am I fighting the right fight? And I don't mean that we should fight ourselves, right? But am I putting my effort into the right battle?
Yeah.
And so often we don't. And one of the things I'm reflecting on when we talked a few weeks ago was you said, when you don't ask for help, you are robbing people of fulfilling their own legacy, of fulfilling their own generosity and gratitude. Mm-hmm. And you're robbing yourself, number one, of the time, because I spend a lot of time trying to figure things out when I forget that I have Mr. Google, that I can just say, what is this? Mm-hmm. Right now, I know anytime I Google and it's important, I have to verify and make sure it's right. But tell me more about that, right? When we don't ask for help, we're denying the people in our space, in our tribe, in our homes of an opportunity, which is denying ourselves of an opportunity. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah. In fact, I was having a conversation with my dad. And this is not long ago. I'm just, for those of you who are listening and not watching, I'm 48 years old. And there's a fair amount of dude pride in me. Like I'm human. Like I'm going to rely on self a lot, and I've had to overcome that a lot and humble myself and ask for help in a lot of places and put the DIY stuff away. So I say all that to kind of preamble what I'm about to say. I don't ask my dad for a lot of advice as much anymore. And there was something that I was wrestling with and struggling with. And finally, I just said, you know what? I think it was after you and I talked. I said, you know what? Am I robbing him of being a great dad by not asking for his help?
Mm-hmm.
And when I called him up and said, hey, this is something I'm wrestling with. What do you think about that? And whether he had the answer or not, and he did, by the way, whether he had the answer or not, the medicine for both of our souls that it was for me, his son, grown man, 48 years old, to ask him advice on something and then him be able to offer some. We both, we didn't solve the world's problems, but we both got medicine for the soul that day.
Yes.
And
you felt something. You felt better. You felt different. You felt connected. You felt lighter. He probably felt buoyed, right, by being able to serve. We are called to serve. Doesn't matter what, what your background is, what your thoughts on faith and religion are, but we are called to serve. That's what we're here to do, right? To be in communion with one another and in community. Yeah. So I look at that and I'm bad at it too, right? I preach, ask for help. I preach, ask for help, but I still have to stop. You saw me stutter before I even said it, right? Because I'm working on it. It's so out of our norm. And to me, this is the noise, right? This is the noise that says, protect yourself, show no vulnerabilities, push forward because you are magic and you can do this alone. You can do anything. Therefore, you must do it yourself. And there's not a billboard or anything that says that. That wasn't part of my quote education, but it's inherent. Like I hear it, right? And then you couple that with the noise of today where you're not enough unless you have XYZ. You're not enough unless you do this, you show that, you pretend, all the things. So I look at this and that's what puts the importance on me trying to practice and asking for help and saying, this is not okay, right? What have you found most? So you work mostly with men, right? A lot, or potentially with a lot more men than I do as a woman coach. I do work with men. Do you find it's harder to get past the noise, or what is your experience getting past the noise with men versus women? Is it the same noise? Is it different noise?
It's the same amount of noise. It's different noise. I think it's different noise. Like, there is, the inner critic is armed with a lot of go solo when you're talking with men. Like that's a lot of what they've got is there's a lot of this kind of, I need to prove it not only to myself, but to the world kind of thing that I can do this.
The man.
Yeah. There's
right?
some of that.
The man. Okay.
Yeah. And I think that there's, first of all, to all the men listening, there's nothing wrong with that. Like you're normal, right? In my personal belief, I believe that men are deeply hardwired in some way to feel as though they need to provide and protect and make sure that people are cared for.
Yep. And to your point, that's powerful and beautiful. And that is a beautiful way to serve.
And on the other side of that spectrum, where you've got the beautiful mystery of the being known as woman, right? There is this vulnerability and this nurturing that men we're not equipped with, from birth. Women seem to be equipped with this mysterious ability to nurture. Yeah. And it's just nothing. Celebrate both pieces, right? It's just both sides of that spectrum, very beautiful characteristics that are in the majority of men and the majority of women. And I think often we kind of get that mixed up and say this person should have this person should have that. I mean, it's
Well,
great,
just because we're typically this way, just because we are seemingly this way, there is a shift in a balance, right? And we can have different levels. I know a lot of women who aren't overly nurturing, but I also know a lot of men who are. So I don't play in the world of binaries in that way, where like you're only one thing and you're only this. But I think kind of where we're going is being able to see the value in the way both genders are inherently acting, right?
Inherently.
And it's okay to adopt a more sensitive, and it's okay to adopt a more protective, kind of nurturing, if you will. So yeah, but I agree. There are these stereotypes and gender norms, if you will, for a reason.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I think that, well, where I was going with that is like some of those norms that exist, right? It's not that they should be dismantled or shuffled off to one side or the other. That's not what I'm getting at. What I'm saying is that those are powerful. Those inherent pieces, they're powerful. And that powerful piece can be a double-edged sword. So if I am only leaning into the provider and protector as a man, and I have no nurturing bone in my body, I'm robbing my kids of a nurturing father.
Right.
I'm robbing myself of the ability to nurture and put my arm around my daughter or my son when they're struggling with something and say, hey, come here, let me talk to you for a second, right? So the fact is that we may have those inherent characteristics, but that also kind of says, hey, let's not just ebb to one side, let's ebb and flow a little bit. And Dr. Brene Brown, she talks about vulnerability a lot in her books. And
I love her.
I know I do too. When I do, I've done some men's retreats. And when I open up the men's retreats, essentially because I got a bunch of dudes in a room, right? And we're in the woods and it's like, okay, all right, there's a lot of grunting and that kind of stuff. But I tell them what she talked about with vulnerability. And I say, hey, the grizzly bear is most fierce when it is most vulnerable. When it's up on its hind legs, all of its vital organs are exposed, it is its most fierce. So you need to reestablish your relationship with being fierce, with being vulnerable. The more vulnerable you are, the stronger you will become. And when they can change the relationship in their mind to that mindset shift right there, number one, it makes it for a lot more conversational retreat. But number two, their walls come down, right? I don't need to protect. I can open up and share ideas. And it's that kind of ebbing from one side and flowing to the other, kind of, bringing in more of the other. So it's a beautiful thing when you can do that. So
that's incredible. I mean, I love the idea of the men's retreats, and I want to be very clear. I'm not harping on men as being anything other than beautiful, powerful, highly capable beings, right? But in the norms of our world, when we talk about emotions and mindset and going within, it attracts a more female audience, right?
Sure.
So I very much appreciate that that these conversations and retreats and spaces are also being offered to men, because when we put up those walls and don't allow our boundaries or our vulnerabilities to flourish, to be seen, right? To your point, we're the grizzly bear and we're highly vulnerable, but we're also highly stimulated and going to push forward potentially and live someone else's dream, right? To go back to your colleague. So this might bridge nicely into another piece that I found out from you. Brian and I were introduced through my cousin, who is also working as a virtual assistant, which I think is awesome. Way to go, virtually possible.
Yeah.
She let me know that you do something pretty incredible, and you had mentioned that you spend time working with firemen and rescue workers, but she told me a little bit more about the way that you choose to serve that population. Can you tell us about that today?
Yeah. So, recognizing that first responders are under an incredible amount of mental stress. And first of all, I am not a clinical therapist. I am not licensed as a therapist. So I do not practice therapy when I do what I do by any means. In fact, I open up my talks with them about that.
Which is really important, right?
It really is.
We are not here to say we are therapists.
That's right. That's right.
And we can talk about that perhaps in a moment,
but we do, I do stress management training for first responders. And ultimately, I do something with all of my entrepreneurial clients, and that is to help them find a big picture impact. And that's my big picture impact. I had a friend of mine about a year and a half ago now, that nobody knew he was hurting. No one knew. He smiley face, great guy. Everybody loved him. And he made the choice to take his own life. And that was because of stress that he was under. And because of that, in the field that he was in, and I've got lots of friends that are in that first responder field, I just said, you know what? I think I want to do something there. And I don't know exactly what that looks like, but where I can play is I can come in and say, let's do some stress management training. I can bring about awareness to different ways to handle stress and guide people and direct them that, hey, if you need therapy, go get it. If the stigma is gone, get that out of your head. Go get somebody to talk to that can walk you through if it's PTSD that you're dealing with. Because a lot of people don't know that, like, we hear PTSD and we think veterans, which they do struggle with a lot. Mm-hmm. But when you're a firefighter and you're watching something happen that you can't control, there's a lot of PTSD that people suffer with that. Police officers, ER or ED, yep. They don't call them ERs anymore. ED staff. And
what does that mean? ED? What does that mean?
I forget, but I get reminded of it because my sister-in-law is a nurse, and she's like, it's not the ER anymore, it's the ED. I'm like, okay. Just as long as I can get that right, I'm cool.
Get to the right place.
Yeah. But it's they deal with a lot of undue stress, and learning how to manage that, acknowledge it, and be aware of it is really where my training comes in. It's like, here's how you can be aware of it. Here's some of the signs you're going to see that kind of sneak up on you. Here's the way that you can acknowledge that. And if you're seeing these kinds of things go on, this is the type of help that you need to get.
What are some of the takeaways, or maybe if there's like one particular activity that you do with this group? What I'm thinking is, how do we share with our audience either a thought activity or something to pay attention to with this particular demographic in their lives, right? So, my brother-in-law was a police officer, and I have mm-hmm. lots of family involved in, FDNY, and these are my people, and I see the struggle and I see the suffering. And I had a man work for me who was a fireman, and he would end his, shift and come right in and tell me the story of how so-and-so, their house was burned down or a child was injured. And then he would just keep moving forward. Mm-hmm. And I'm stuck going, oh my gosh, like I'm traumatized just from hearing about his experience. So I think, is there a nugget or a gem that our audience can walk away with of something mm-hmm. to think about towards a healthy conversation or a supportive presence with first responders?
Yeah. So I think about things in this particular sense, like there's internal and external mm-hmm. symptoms that you will see where stress is kind of grabbing someone. And if people will most often notice the external symptoms first. Okay. The problem is that the internal symptoms have been there for a really long time if the external symptoms are showing up. External
leading and lagging indicators, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's like a dash. It's like a light on your dash, right? Mm-hmm. You were running out of gas before the light came on. Right. Right. So, but some of those lights that come on are weight gain, right? I know it sounds kind of silly, but it's like we've all had our own personal, fitness journeys and all that kind of stuff. And I totally get that. But like, if you are stressed, you will notice the weight gain. You will notice it in places where stress weight shows up. This is around, for men, that's around your belly and around your bottom. Women, it can be around bottom and around legs and that kind of thing. There's a lot of stress weight that shows up there. Headaches. This is all the physical stuff that's going on. There is a tiredness that doesn't go away when you are consistently frustrated and stressed out. And it's just exhaustion, like this feeling of, I got to do this again. And what ends up happening is over and over, especially people in the first responder field, they will train themselves to emotionally and mentally disconnect.
Yes.
They're training
It's a
themselves to do
safety
that.
mechanism,
Yeah,
right? Because
absolutely.
how do you keep going if you're reliving and torturing yourself through what happened yesterday or a year ago? And we do that everywhere, right? That's human nature. We do that. We protect ourselves. Our brain's only purpose is to keep us safe. Yes, I
Yeah.
mean, well, our ego, at least, its only purpose is to keep us safe. But we still have to live in this world, and we still have to live in these bodies.
Mhm.
And I think that when we make that connection and the people in our tribe a priority, right? And our tribe isn't only our family, it's our community, it's the people that we rely on, it's the people who rely on us. We cannot take life at face value anymore, I don't think. Our face value is, a culture of curation, right? On Instagram, our face value is, how are you, Ryan? Good, Michaela, thanks. Just busy. Cha, 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 cha. And
Yep.
that's face value. But to your point, the lagging indicator, right? My face shouldn't show my sadness, because that means it's eating me up inside.
Yeah.
What have you found, do you agree with that we are so conditioned to just make everything look perfect that it's kind of eating us inside? And what is the role, do you think, of social media in that aspect of our life today?
Yeah, no. I think it's huge. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think, that again, that goes back to living somebody else's dream. That's one of the things that will steal your energy and steal your joy.
Yep.
I want to hit on something on the internal piece of that, maybe some things that people can be looking for before that the physical things show up. Like if your environment, let me finish up on the outside, the external pieces. If you're not normally a messy person and now you're kind of just letting things go, that's an indicator, right?
That's great.
If you are letting like your physical fitness go, you're starting to see weight gain happen. Or if you are still doing the same old routine and all of a sudden weight starts to show up, that's one. Headaches, that kind of thing. Social distancing, like not the kind that was going on in COVID, but the
Not
kind that
COVID.
kind that where you are, to your point, it's like, no, I'm good. Everything's fine. Like that, everything's fine. We've all seen the little meme with a little cartoon dog sitting in his kitchen and it's on fire and he's drinking coffee and it's like, everything's fine.
Yep.
Like if that's happening in your world externally, talk to somebody and somebody close to you. Hey, this is what's going on. But the internal things to be looking for is if you are feeling purposeless. And by that, I don't mean just like, oh, I want to know what my purpose is and I can't figure it out. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about from a hopeless standpoint. If you feel like why bother? Like, oh my gosh, this is awful. Why bother?
Yeah.
Why am I even getting up today? That is a disconnectedness from self. That is you are missing that spiritual connection. And whether that is a religious type of spirituality, or if it's just the spirituality of feeling connected and with oneness with self. If you aren't feeling that, like that is an indicator. If things are cloudy where they used to be clear, if you can't remember things that are normally easy to remember, and I don't mean like, your phone number when you were in fourth grade. I mean, like things that you should be able to remember from last week in a conversation, if that's happening, you are under undue stress. Or if you have emotional swings that would rival a roller coaster, that is also an indicator. And going to talk to somebody, find a therapist, you can find someone that you can work with around those things. That's so important. But some things that you can do for yourself is, one, get active if you're not active. Two, start with rest. Prioritize your rest. Most of the time when I find people that are overworked and overstressed, it's because they are not resting and they are super tired and frustrated. Prioritize your nutrition. I'm not here to tell you whether it's keto or whether it's South Beach diet or whether it's, whatever it is. I'm not a nutritionist and don't really care what you eat, but when you are not eating to fuel your body and you're eating
for fun. Yeah.
And,
well, that's I challenge my people with that all the time. Are you feeding for fuel or are you feeding for fun? Yeah. And I'm a fan of both, right? Like I want you to have fun. I do, but it needs to be conscious, right? As long as the majority of what you're eating is fueling you, then that leaves a little room for the fun. And that that goes with all the things, right? That's, you can exercise all day and you can take a day off. You
Exactly.
can just make the best decision to yield your individual greatest outcome. That's living the dream, right?
Yes.
I am
Intentional.
choosing my dream.
Exactly. Choosing. And you're intentional. If you're intentional about your rest, you're intentional about your nutrition, you're intentional about your fitness. I don't care if it's walking or if it's, throwing a tennis ball at the wall in the garage. I don't care.
Right.
Whatever you decide intentionality is for fitness, cool, go do that. But
That's
be
it.
intentional about it. And then the last one is intentional about reflection and growth. Like if I am focused on how I have been operating and how I would like to transform and grow into a better person, those 4 disciplines that I help people with that help to relieve some stress.
Awesome. All right. List the 4 real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Intentional rest,
Mhm.
prioritize your rest, prioritize your nutrition, prioritize fitness, and prioritize growth, personal growth.
This is what's so funny, right? Seems so simple, like duh, but we don't do it, right? We culturally big by and large, we don't do it enough yet. Then we get to say, why is life throwing me all these lemons? I got to keep making lemonade. And why does life keep happening to me? Well, I know that when I went on a journey to prioritize rest and learn to sleep and create the conditions for me to become, I can put myself to sleep. I can take a nap and I can wake myself up from a nap. It's pretty magical, but it took a lot of time, and it took, I'm listening to you go through this list. It took me wanting to deal with my own fatigue. It took me wanting to deal with my own dis-ease, right? To make that a priority. Now, choosing sleep as a priority meant I had to make other choices about what and when I ate, what and when I drank, what and when I exercised, how to fit it all in, how to make all of it. But the result is I now have a body that is aware of what equilibrium is. And those things that are out of alignment, I can now work on specifically. Yes. Instead of, I've gone to my doctor before and been told, oh, well, we can't fix that, the fatigue or any of that stuff. You just need to take a pill. No, I don't want the pill. I want to dig in. I want to find the root cause and eliminate any obstacle, any barriers, so that I can be my healthiest, happiest self.
Yes.
It's still a journey, right? But it really was about prioritizing rest. How do I manage that? And that helped to trickle into all the other things that you mentioned. Yeah. So from my observation, I think you nailed it. I love it.
Cool. Well, and a lot of that came from, learning about how to support people as a coach. A lot of it came from learning about how to, like, what worked best, right? Well, when I feel rested, I feel like I can take on the world.
Yes.
Well, when's the last time you felt rested? Oh, well, that's different.
Exactly. Right. We know these things. We know it's a vital piece, but yet it's sometimes hard to choose in that moment, because it is a choice, right? And it means giving up something that previously you thought worked for you, and choosing to try something else, which you may not be very good at. Probably won't be very good at in the beginning, but that's the growth. And I say all the time, you have to choose your heart, right? Staying the same, that's hard, right? Yeah. Staying, like, treading water is an extraordinary amount of energy output, right? And swimming can also be an extraordinary output. The question is, do you want to stay where you are, or do you want to go somewhere else? Right. And I'm all about the choosing, maybe not every day and every minute, because we have to give ourselves some space to push through each challenge, but we have to choose our heart. And when we choose to stay the same, do it knowingly. Say, I'm aware that I'm here, but I'm doing 1, 2, 3 things over on the other side that will open up space for this aspect of my life to change. Because we can't just change everything all at once, right?
One of the things that came to mind when you were talking about treading water and swimming, which is such a great analogy, by the way, was that one of the other things that I see a lot of people struggle with, men and women for that matter, of my clients, is, and I've struggled with it myself a good bit, is this lack of alignment. There's this lack of integrity. And I don't mean that, like, when I say that, it's going to get this brand in people's mind. It's like, oh, lack of integrity means you're doing something wrong. You should be doing something right. It's not what I mean.
Nope.
It's more of a say do kind of thing. And what you are saying you want versus what you are doing to get it. And when you think about the treading water and swimming, what I see a lot of times is that people are trying to do both and they are exhausted. They are trying to tread water in a general direction. Like,
Right.
like you're going, and my coach calls it going 99%. She's like, I call that 99%. You are 99% committed to this thing you say you want to do. But if you're even 1% of your foot is back in the old thing, you are fighting yourself. And when you are able to let go of one of these and go all in, it becomes so much more easy, so much more simple, and so much more, because you feel this congruency, this alignment, and this say do kind of like locks in on itself, and it's really good. So
it's totally accurate. And I know that in the times in my life where I have felt that want and that go, but also keeping voluntarily my foot locked into the old, it is exhausting. How do you release? How do you help people get beyond that to say, I am willing to release this old way of being and move beyond?
I remember this, Lisa Kaplan's a fantastic coach trainer for IPEC, by the way. She's amazing. I hope one day you get to meet her. She's amazing. She's a bubbly, fun, amazing person. But she calls this showing people themselves. Like that's part of coaching, is to kind of just say, hey, here's what I'm seeing. What do you notice?
Yeah.
And in the way that a lot of times I'll frame that as I'll say, hey, listen, what I'm seeing is that you've got 1 foot in this and you've got 1 foot in this, and it's causing a lot of exhaustion. What do you see when you see these two pieces together? And they'll either, agree or disagree or whatever it is. Assuming that they say, yeah, I could see that. And, it is a lot of work, and I do feel exhausted and I do feel tired and this and that. And then I asked them, what would it be like if thing A that you've got a foot in, if you were to take your foot out of that and just go all in on B, what's the danger in that? What's the excitement in that? And have them walk through it, and then do that on both sides, and then say, when, this struggle that you're in has meaning, like this, having a foot in both of these has meaning. So it's normal to struggle with this. But at some point, if you're going to get where you say you want to go, you're going to have to let go of one of them. Does that make sense? And they'll say yes or no, like I don't want to let go of it, or whatever it is. They'll fight it, and it's like, okay, so it's fine.
Which is such a great answer, because then we can figure out why.
Yeah,
right. And sorry to jump in, but I love that. I love when people are honest. Don't tell me you're ready to take your foot out if you're not.
Right. And what will it cost you to let go? What are you losing? What are you giving up? And a lot of times what they do is they do this kind of mental inventory, and they do the mental inventory, and they've just kind of stacked it up and said, I'm losing so much. But when they actually go through the list and write it down, they go, well, these are all the things that I said I wanted to step away from. What am I doing holding on to them? And now they've unlocked in their own mind. They've shifted and said, I don't need to have a foot here. Like I get that it's holding me back, and that's one reason I want to move forward. But there's no reason to stay. Like I'm not having any reason to stay in that camp. So it's a matter of shining a light and bringing their awareness to the fact that there is a lack of alignment, and then asking them about, let's explore that. Let's dig into that, because that, when they can make that move, the transformation, that's it's where the magic happens. That's what they always call it. But that transformation, when they can go from this is who I was and what I was doing to this is where I am and what I'm doing now, that is when they feel like they've had this massive discovery and transformation.
I love that. And it brings us kind of back to the beginning, where I say a lot, I can't see my nose. I mean, when I looked, I can't see my nose. And it's so obvious to everybody else that I have a nose, right? But when I look down, I can't see my nose. and I use that reference to say, what else are we missing, right? When we are so close and so sure of the thing, but we still can't see our nose, right? So when we look at how important it is to ask questions, to have questions asked of us, to be in a space where we can say, I don't know the answer, but what if I did? That to me is why coaching, and in its prevalence in the last, 10, 20 years, is such a gift to our culture.
Mm-hmm.
To say, as opposed with therapy, which is very much going back, unraveling, pulling forward, and then moving beyond. And that's a very simplistic way to put it. But coaches, we look at, where are you here and where do you want to go? And what are you willing to do to get there? And how can I support you? Yes, we play in that world of therapy-esque, right? Because we listen, we ask solution-focused questions, we are compassionate, but it's also, now, how do you want to move forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I always say that working with a coach and a therapist is a beautiful package, right? They help each other.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, when we are only in our heads and we are only saying, not aware that one foot is still in the old way, we will exhaust ourselves out of our purpose. That's how I see it, right? So working with coaches, to me, is that the buoy, it's the balloon that kind of says, whoop, what if we lifted you up and tried life without that foot in that box for just a moment? Just pretend and flush through the fear, and then build in hope coupled with, behaviors and mindsets. And I think it's a great point to say, people have said to me, Michaela, you interview coaches on your podcast. Aren't you a coach? Aren't you here to promote yourself? And I said, well, no, yes, no, I don't know. But for me, the most important thing I can do with this podcast is to give away the magic, to give the insights and the inspiration to our listeners to say, well, that was interesting. I hadn't thought of that before.
Yeah.
So the process that you just walked us through, for those listening, rewind, go back, put yourself a challenge on the table, figure out something that you're holding yourself back from, and then listen again as Ryan asks you these questions. And it is a step towards releasing that foot, right?
Yeah.
And then it's, oh, wow, that felt kind of good. And it's reaching out and saying, I need help. And not because there's anything wrong, because there's anything egregious with who you are. It's just, we all can't see our noses.
Yeah.
Right. And it's having that person to help us reflect our inner selves. So in that way, when I think about my role as a coach and how I got here and all the things I have yet to do, I always take my experiences there and tie them into my role as a parent, my role as a community member. How do you, and I'm gonna guess here, how do you help kids keep their imagination alive? Your children, your nieces and nephew, or your family. How do you help keep that imagination alive? Because keeping that, to me, is what lets people walk down the hall and say, live in the dream, and also be imagining what that dream will be next or could be next. So share with us a little bit about your family and how you integrate imagination into that.
Yeah. So for those of you listening, Michaela is aware that my brother-in-law and sister-in-law and their two nephews,
so cool.
My two nephews, live right across the street from us. My wife's a twin, and her twin sister lives right across the street. So we've chosen that intentionally to have our kids grow up together and be part of each other's lives. So when you say tribe, like, there is a definite, like there's a definite image that comes to mind of us having two street corners of a tribe here. But I think imagination is so powerful. There's so much about dreaming that is important, and being able to dream and not let the limitations that you see in the world get you. Now, at the same time, we're going to run into limitations. Like, we're human beings. We're in a physical world at this point in time, and we're going to run into challenges. And I think it's about keeping the imagination alive, keeping kids purposeful, keeping them moving forward. There's a few things. Number one is not looking for the mountaintop experience to step in and put your arm around them and go, see, you made it. But looking for the valley experience and asking what they can do to step out of it. That's super important.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. I love that so very much, because if we're only seeking the high highs, we miss the whole journey, the next right thing, the next small thing, the next exciting thing. I love that.
Yeah.
I'm
And
gonna
and
sit
then
on
there's
that for a
this
minute.
piece about, and I don't just tell my kids this, but I tell my clients this, my friends this. If God put it in your head and in your heart, the world needs that. It is up to you to bring that to the world. And that don't be encumbered by what somebody else's restrictions are, by what the normal way to do something is. If it's in your head and your heart, there is a way. And the old saying, if there's a will, there's a way. And for the longest time, I was like, I never really understood what that meant until it's kind of a sidebar, but when someone at church told me, said, just replace the word will with choice. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
where there's a choice, there's a way. And they even said, hey, when there's a last will and testament, there's a last choice. This is how I choose for my things to be distributed, right? So, and when I think about that, when there's a will, there's a way. When there's a choice, there's a way. And if your choice is to move forward and accomplish something that you want in life, it doesn't have to fit the norm on how you get there. That can be the unique story that you bring to the world. That could be the inspiration that the world needs. That could be why God put it in your head and in your heart. You just get the reward of doing it and enjoying it along the way. So if something's in your head and in your heart, and God put it there, the world needs that. Go do it. And I try to keep my kids in mind on that all the time. So
That was great. I kind of just want to pause on all of that and let that settle. Because I look at it and I see so deeply in people opportunity and potential. And then I also see us, through our schooling and through all phases of life, take the standardized test. Are you standard? Do you meet standardizations? Are you the standard this? And there is nothing about us that's meant to be standard. Period. End of story. Right. So maybe our blood pressure or something really important like that. But as far as who we are and how we bring ourselves to the world, our calling is to serve. Our calling is to show that thing. And so we've kind of touched on it a little bit, and you've referenced it, but spirituality and faith play a big role in your life.
Yeah.
Has that always been that way? And do you feel it aligned with the work you're doing today?
I don't know. I don't know a time that I can remember of not having God in my life. But I remember times when I had seemingly walked away from it. Like when I look back at it now, it's like I recognize that I had walked away. But during that time, I kind of felt, aimless. Early 20s, that kind of thing, college kid, party life, all the good things, all the fun things. The older you get, they're not so good anymore. They kind of come back and haunt you. But the aches and pains. But yeah, there's a point in my life, actually about 12 years ago, I went to John Eldridge does a boot camp for men. 550 guys go out to Colorado, and we went to Crooked Creek Ranch, and it's like a 4-day men's retreat kind of thing. It was awesome. And from that moment on, I was a very, very much of a spirit-led follower of Christ. And that's my faith background. I'm not here to poo-poo on anybody else's or anything like that. That's where my heart is, and that's what I follow. So just to give you the context and the background of that. So as I look through the decisions in my life that I make, I am a very spiritual person in that. And I look for guidance from God on the things that I do in my life. And when I look back and say, yep, I followed his guidance, I can see clear evidence of that, right? Success leaves clues. And when I look back and say, no, I did that on my own accord, I can see just how much of that water treading I was doing. It's interesting. But when it was time for me to leave corporate with, head in hands and trying to figure out what the right thing to do was, that's what I did. So I prayed about it. And when I got my answer, God essentially told me, he goes, hey, you're going to have ups and downs both ways. You need to do what you think makes you live out your purpose. And that's how I know I'm doing what I'm meant to do. And I do it every day. And some days it's hard. And sometimes I question, like, what am I doing? Am I crazy? And some days I'm like, nope, this is why. This is exactly why. So I know in my heart I'm doing what I'm meant to do. And that gives me all the purpose in the world.
Just same. I feel the same way. You know, I've had my own journey with faith, and I still have a lot of questions about religion and different aspects of it. But what I know for certain is that I was divinely created, and the divine gift and the divine voice that's within me is also within you and everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And we are here to bring them to their fullness in our own unique way.
Mm-hmm.
And my intention with this podcast is to help people see those gifts so that they might see some of it in themselves. And the way that you choose the vision for yourself and for your tribe, and the way that you choose to give and serve through working with our first responders and touching on hard subjects like suicide and stress and how we can care for one another. I really believe that you have found your gift, and you will continue to use it. I don't think you have any choice at this point. So what is next for you? What are you working on, and how can people get involved with Ryan McKinney and all the things?
Yeah, so I am doing a lot of one-on-one coaching at this point in time. I have a group that I'm working with right now that is winding down, and then I will be kicking off another group track that's going to kick off somewhere around the end of July. So I'm not sure when this one will air, but the kickoff around the middle to the end of July. But it is for those people that want to take things to the next level. They're looking for that, but they maybe want to do that in a group, or maybe they're not ready to go all in with one-on-one coaching at this point in time. But that's something that's going to be an amazing, fun thing to do. It will mix the personal growth and the professional growth together over the course of 6 months. And the concept here is that there are a lot of people that would love to take on personal and professional growth, but sometimes look at it and go, the expense is too big. Well, with group coaching, a lot of times that becomes a lot more affordable. And that was part of the impetus here too, was to bring this to the masses, get folks that want to grow. Don't let that be an obstacle for you, and do that. So yeah, that's the next big thing on the list.
That's great.
And I'm excited about that. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
That's awesome. I love that. And what do you have planned for the summer for you and your tribe? Anything super exciting? You don't have to give details about times and dates and such, but do you have any goals that you're accomplishing this summer, or will it just be indulgences?
There
For
are definitely
posterity, we're recording in June.
Yeah. So goal for us is I won't give you the long story, but my daughter did not go to the beach with us for spring break this year. She went with friends to Colorado she's a junior in high school, and went with some friends out there to go skiing. Oh. And she's like, Dad, I'm going to miss the beach this year. And I was like, no, sweetheart, you are not going to miss the beach. So we're going to go to the beach at some point during the summer here, maybe for like a really long weekend, like a Wednesday through Sunday kind of deal. We're going to figure that out. But as far as goals go, I am running a race at the end of September, so I've got milestones and goals to achieve with my running over the course of the summer. What kind of a race?
Straight run?
It's a 50K run for Hanging Rock. So
that's cool.
It's I've done one of these before, and the motivation for doing it before, let's put it this way, I was a little disgruntled in the training part of it, and wasn't able to enjoy a lot of the runs and the things that I was doing. And I decided I want to do this again and accomplish it, but I want to feel really good about it. So that's part of it. So step number one is don't die. Like that's goal number one.
Safety first, right?
Yeah,
we both share a manufacturing background, and everything in manufacturing is safety first, number one.
That's right.
So
safety, quality, cost, delivery, and people. Yeah. So that's on the goal list for this summer, is to be in shape and not just accomplish or survive it, but to really enjoy it. So.
And I think that's so important, because as we talk about honoring rest and how do we, make that a priority, one of the things that I've had to think about in my life as I've moved on and become a very professional, serious person, I forgot how to play. I forgot how to play. I mean, I'm very playful. I have a lot of fun, but when given the choice of how do you honor play in your life and in your family, which was asked to me in a podcast last summer, and now I can't stop thinking about it. But I want to make a focus on both, right? So I think even as you and I talk about these really important, digging deep things, it's still important to have fun things to look forward to and to build an intentional life where you get to say, yes, you missed this, but we're going to make up the beach because I understand that that's a value for you and we can manage it. And so it's nice to kind of show, yes, I think you and I both work really hard and are really devoted to bringing forth these gifts, but we also need to play. Yeah. We also need to have some fun. And that's a great way to manage stress. So my last question before I let you go today is if you could, and this is my, little homage to Tim Ferriss. I love this question. If you could have a billboard, right? It's the billboard question. If you could have a billboard for all the world to see, now we've imagined that we've marketed your program, you are heavily advertised. Mm-hmm. If you could say one thing on this billboard that would really impact the masses, what would you choose to say? And it could change tomorrow, but we're not going to hold it in stone, but in this day, on this moment.
In this imperfect attempt and imperfect moment, let's see. It doesn't have to be hard. I think that's what I'd put on there.
There you go.
It doesn't have to be hard.
Maybe I need to add that to my choose your hard, right?
Yeah.
Because when you do, it doesn't have to be hard. It might challenge you, but with the right attitude and perspective. Okay, I like that. I'm going to have to filter that into my little standing statement. Ryan, I really appreciate you. I thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation, because the way you choose to spend your time and every other aspect of your life is important, and it's inspiring, and it really is truly changing lives. So hit us with your website, hit us with any socials you want us to follow, because we need more of this conversation. We need more people like you and like me actively moving forward the scale on finding more joy. So how do we find you?
Yeah, so you can find me at my website. It is ryandmckinney.com. The D is for Daniel. I have to say that or people will go, did he say E or what? So ryandmckinney.com. And all of my socials are listed there. You can find all the different ways to connect with me. And if you're interested and would like a conversation, there's a way to do that there too. Mm-hmm. And this is simply a conversation. I reserve some time on there for when I'm a guest on a podcast or things like that. And you can see that there's some connection calls. If somebody says, hey, I'm not really sure if this fits, does it fit? That's what those calls are for. So if you're interested in that, that's great. But I'd love for you to come follow me, and whether it's your Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever the social is that you like, we've got something on there for it. Yeah.
I love it. And we probably have to circle back and touch on a couple other conversations, because I really, there's so much more to say, but thank you. And I will look forward to staying in touch with you. And for everyone else, make it a great day. And thanks for joining us.
All right. Thanks, Michaela. Bye, everybody.
And that's a wrap on another episode of And All the Things. If you enjoyed today's show, please like and follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. If you really liked it, please go ahead and rate it. Then think about who in your life might also need to hear it and any of the other episodes we have shared. Then share it with them. When you find something meaningful, something valuable, you've got to share it and pay it forward to those you care for. Thanks for joining us, and follow along on Instagram at MyJoyCoach to see more of me, your host, Michaela Birdyshaw. And as always, make it a great day.